Parents, sold my sacred land. Brother got a car with my inheritance family, hid my adoption for 25 years. The email glowed on my father's computer screen like a neon accusation. Sale complete, Redfoot ancestral property. My grandmother's sacred land, the only thing she'd left specifically to me, sold without my knowledge or consent. My signature, forged at the bottom of documents I'd never seen. I glanced through the window where my brother's brand-new sports car gleamed in the driveway, purchased exactly 1 week after the land sale closed. The same amount, $80,000. My inheritance transformed into his luxury. My name is Wachiwi Redfoot. I'm 30 years old, a bank branch manager in Chicago with an apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. And until this moment, I'd spent my entire life trying to understand why I was never enough for my family. I just never expected to find the answer in a single devastating betrayal. You know those family photos where someone always looks slightly out of place? In our family albums, that person was invariably me, positioned at the edges, sometimes partially cropped out, as if my presence was an awkward afterthought rather than an essential part of the frame. Once, I discovered my mother had actually edited our Christmas card photo to center my brother Tokala more prominently, accidentally pushing me halfway out of the image. When I pointed it out, her genuine confusion about why this bothered me felt like being erased twice, first in the photo, then in my pain. My earliest memory is standing in our living room in my dance recital outfit, pirouetting for parents who barely looked up from helping Tokala tune his first guitar. "That's nice, honey," Mom murmured without seeing the routine I'd practiced for weeks. Dad didn't respond at all. I learned early that achievements wouldn't bring the attention I craved. My straight-A report cards warranted brief nods. My advanced placement in math earned a distracted, "good job." Meanwhile, Tokala's C- grades prompted family discussions about the education system failing creative children, and his simplest guitar melodies received standing ovations in our living room. My 10th birthday illustrates everything perfectly. My parents forgot to order a cake because they had to attend Tokala's guitar showcase. That evening, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor with a single convenience store cupcake, whispering "happy birthday" to myself as I blew out a candle I wasn't supposed to light. I still have the photograph. A little girl in a carefully beaded dress, holding that sad cupcake with tear tracks visible despite my attempted smile. I keep it as a reminder that I wasn't imagining things. The pattern continued through every milestone. For Tokala's high school graduation, where he barely passed, my parents organized a massive celebration with relatives traveling from 3 states away. For mine, despite graduating as valedictorian, they scheduled a small dinner that was ultimately canceled when Tokala's band got a last-minute local gig. "This could be his big break," Dad explained, not meeting my eyes. I gave my achievement speech to an auditorium where not a single seat held someone who had come specifically for me. My roommate's parents took me to dinner afterward, uncomfortable witnesses to my family's absence. Financial decisions illuminated the disparity with mathematical precision. Tokala attended Berklee College of Music, his $45,000 annual tuition covered by my parents taking out a second mortgage. When my Northwestern acceptance letter arrived, Mom handed me financial aid forms with a smile that mixed pride and dismissal. "You're so responsible, Wachiwi. We know you can handle this yourself." As if competence deserved punishment while mediocrity earned reward. I worked 2 campus jobs while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Meanwhile, Tokala dropped out after 3 semesters, his abandoned tuition a $70,000 hole my parents never mentioned at family gatherings. Every Christmas morning quantified our respective worth with painful clarity. I'd save for months to buy thoughtful gifts, a traditional hand-carved pipe for Dad, a turquoise pendant for Mom. My packages typically contained practical items I already needed: gas station gift cards, work clothes, kitchen supplies. Tokala received the latest technology: recording equipment, computers, concert tickets. Once, After watching Tokala unwrap a MacBook Pro while I received a $25 Target gift card, I locked myself in the bathroom and silently screamed into a towel until my throat burned raw. When I emerged composed 20 minutes later, Mom asked why my eyes were red. Allergies, I lied. The truth, that I was allergic to my own insignificance in their eyes, seemed too pathetic to voice. Your brother is pursuing a difficult creative path, Dad would explain whenever I gathered the courage to question the imbalance. He needs more resources and encouragement. The message was clear. My stable, responsible choices somehow justified receiving less of everything: attention, resources, celebration, love. But there was one person who saw me differently, the only person who ever truly did. My grandmother Chumani was my sanctuary. In her small home at the edge of the reservation, I was never background noise or an afterthought. Come, little Wachiwi, she'd say, patting the wooden porch swing beside her. Tell me everything about your day. Every single detail matters to me. And I would. For hours, as sunset painted the sky in watercolors, we'd string beads for her artisan jewelry while I shared thoughts and hurts I never voiced at home. She listened as if my words were rare gems, each one worthy of careful attention. I see myself in you, she told me when I was 16. We were making traditional fry bread, my flour-dusted hands clumsily attempting to copy her practiced movements. Your grandfather favored your father and uncle too. It's an old pattern in our family. She paused, her hands stilling in the dough. Your father grew bitter when his music dreams died, and now he's placing all that failed hope on Tokala's shoulders. She gripped my wrists suddenly. The eastern acres of our land near the stream, those 5 acres will be yours when I'm gone, not the family's, yours alone. Why me specifically? I asked, not understanding the significance then. Because daughters need roots of their own, she said firmly, something that can't be taken from you. Something that connects you to your ancestors when everything else feels uncertain. She made it official in her will. 5 acres of ancestral land legally transferred solely to my name after her passing. The property had been in our family for 4 generations, one of our last physical connections to our heritage. When she passed 2 years later, I visited the land often. Sometimes I'd bring a blanket and sit beneath the ancient oak where generations of my family had gathered. With closed eyes, I'd feel a sense of belonging that eluded me elsewhere. In that space, I mattered. I belonged. I was seen. The land wasn't particularly valuable when she left it to me, worth perhaps $20,000. But development in the area had gradually increased its value to around $80,000. I had plans to eventually build a small cabin there, a personal sanctuary where I could feel my grandmother's presence and connect with the ancestors she'd taught me to honor, until the day I discovered it was gone. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unremarkable except for the way it would permanently alter my life. I was helping Dad set up his new printer when an email notification flashed on his screen. Land sale completion, Redfoot property. My fingers moved before my mind could process what I was seeing. I clicked the email open as Dad left to answer a phone call. The entire transaction laid bare before me. My 5 acres sold for $82,000 to a local developer. Attached was a scan of ownership transfer documents, complete with what appeared to be my signature, a signature I had never made. The room tilted sideways. My stomach clenched as if I'd been physically struck. This wasn't just about money. This was theft of my heritage. My grandmother's final gift, my only sanctuary. I stumbled from Dad's office, vision blurring, and found myself staring through the window at Tokala's new sports car, purchased exactly 1 week after the sale completed. The price tag I'd glimpsed on the dealership papers, $79,000, almost the exact amount from my land. That night, while my parents attended a community function, I did something I'd never done before. In their bedroom closet sat my mother's cedar chest, always locked, always private. Using the spare key I'd discovered years earlier but had always respected enough not to use, I carefully lifted the intricately carved lid. Beneath layers of family documents, I found a folder labeled simply, Wachiwi, Adoption. The world stopped spinning. With trembling hands, I opened it to discover papers confirming what no one had ever told me. I wasn't biologically a Redfoot. I'd been adopted at birth from a young woman in a neighboring tribe. A handwritten note from my mother to my father read, "We should tell her before she's 18. It might explain why it's harder for you to bond with her compared to Tokala." 25 years of feeling like an outsider suddenly crystallized with terrible clarity. I wasn't imagining the distance. I truly was other in my father's eyes, not a blood continuation of his lineage. I carefully photographed every document before returning everything exactly as I'd found it. Then I closed the chest, locked it, and returned to my room where I silently screamed into my pillow until my throat felt shredded. The land theft was no longer just about favoritism. It was about my very place in the family. My grandmother had left me that land knowing I would need connection to my heritage, especially because she apparently knew I was adopted, and my parents had stolen even that tenuous connection. As dawn broke, I made my decision. This would end with truth, regardless of the cost. Sunday dinner was our sacred family tradition, the perfect stage for what needed to happen next. I spent 2 days gathering evidence, copies of my grandmother's will, property ownership documents, the land sale contract with my forged signature, and printouts of the adoption papers. I dressed with deliberate care that evening, wearing my grandmother's turquoise necklace and a ribbon skirt she had made for me, armor for battle. The meal began predictably. Mom served Tokala first. Dad asked enthusiastically about his latest music project. I sat quietly, heart hammering against my ribs, waiting. When conversation momentarily paused, I placed the folder on the table with deliberate slowness. The soft thud it made seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet room. "I need to ask about grandmother's land," I said, my voice unnaturally steady. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's expression hardened into the mask I'd seen countless times before, detachment before dismissal. "You sold it," I continued when no one spoke. "Without my knowledge, you forged my signature on legal documents." The silence stretched until Dad finally responded, his tone condescending as if explaining something to a child. "It was a family decision for family benefit. Tokala needed the investment for his career. You're already established." I opened the folder methodically, laying out the evidence page by page. "This was my land," I said, my control beginning to fracture. "Grandmother left it specifically to me. You committed fraud by forging my signature." Mom's tears appeared like clockwork, those manipulative droplets I'd seen deployed strategically my entire life. "Why are you trying to hurt the family? We've always done what's best for everyone." "For everyone? Or for Tokala?" I challenged, looking directly at my brother for the first time that evening. "Did you know your new car was purchased with money from my stolen land?" Tokala stared at his plate, shoulders hunched. "They just said it was a gift," he mumbled without meeting my eyes. "I didn't ask where the money came from." "Of course you didn't," I replied, bitterness seeping through. "You've never had to question where your privileges come from." Dad slammed his hand against the table, making dishes jump. "That's enough. Tokala has real talent and potential. He could make it big with the right support. You've always managed on your own, Wachiwi. You don't need the same help." "So my reward for being responsible is having my inheritance stolen?" I asked incredulously. "We're family," Dad insisted, his voice rising. "We support each other. When Tokala succeeds, everyone benefits." I laughed without humor. "When has this family support ever gone in my direction? When have you sold anything of Tokala's to fund my education or career?" The argument escalated until Mom, overwhelmed, shouted something that stopped all of us cold. "You don't understand the pressure. Your father gave up everything for this family. He could have been somebody in music, but he sacrificed it all when we got pregnant with Tokala. Now Tokala carries that dream. He's the blood continuation of your father's talent." The room went deathly silent. Dad stared at Mom in shock at her unplanned revelation. "Blood continuation," I repeated softly, the words tasting like ash. "So that's the root of it all." I reached into my purse and withdrew the adoption documents I'd photocopied. With trembling hands, I placed them on the table beside the land sale papers. Is this why I've always been second place? Because I'm not your biological child? The blood drained from both my parents' faces. Tokala looked up in genuine shock. Apparently, he hadn't known either. Where did you get those? Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. Does it matter? What matters is you've lied to me my entire life. About my origins and about my inheritance. My voice cracked. Grandmother knew, didn't she? That's why she left the land specifically to me. She wanted to make sure I had a connection to my heritage that you couldn't take away. Tears spilled freely now. But you took it anyway. With shaking hands, I placed a check on the table. Here's $80,000, my entire savings. Take it and find a way to buy back my land. This is your last opportunity to make something right. Dad stared at the check before slowly, deliberately tearing it in half. The land is gone. The developer has already started clearing it. If you can't accept family decisions, perhaps you should leave. I looked around the table one final time, at the walls that had witnessed 25 years of systematic emotional neglect, disguised as family love. I'm not your second-choice daughter anymore, I said quietly, removing my napkin from my lap and placing it beside my untouched plate. Goodbye. As I walked toward the door, neither parent moved to stop me. Only Tokala called weakly, Wachiwi, wait. But he remained seated, unwilling to stand against our parents, even in this moment of truth. The sound of the door closing behind me was the period at the end of a life sentence. The week after leaving my family was physical agony. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I lay curled on my apartment floor, unable even to make it to bed. My body literally ached from severing connections, however toxic they had been. My college roommate Winona found me there when she came to check after I missed our weekly call. She stayed for 10 days, gently coaxing me to drink smoothies when solid food seemed impossible, sitting with me through nights of sobbing, and helping me begin processing the dual trauma of land theft and identity deception. Sometimes the family we choose holds us more tenderly than the family we're born to, or in your case, adopted into, she reminded me, braiding my hair as grandmother once did. You are deeply loved, Wachiwi, just not by the people who should have loved you most. On the 9th day, an email arrived from Tokala that shifted everything. I've been complicit and I'm sorry. His message revealed uncomfortable truths. This wasn't the first time my assets had been diverted. My college fund, built from birthday checks from relatives and childhood babysitting money, had been borrowed to pay off Tokala's credit card debts. A small inheritance from our grandfather had been given entirely to Tokala's first band, despite being left to both of us. He attached images of an old savings account book, opened by grandmother when I was 8. The $35,000 balance had been emptied when I was 17, just as I was applying to colleges. I've lived in a bubble of privilege while watching you struggle, Tokala wrote. I accepted their narrative that I needed more without questioning why you deserved less. I'm selling the car. I can't keep a gift purchased with your stolen birthright. I read his words through tears, feeling vindication and grief simultaneously. My perception hadn't been wrong. The injustice was documented. But confirmation brought its own pain. The final death of any illusion that my childhood had been anything but systematic favoritism. Something broke open inside me after Tokala's email. The fog of self-doubt that had clouded my entire life began lifting. If the favoritism was real and documented, if I wasn't crazy or too sensitive for perceiving unfairness, then perhaps I could trust my other perceptions too. I wrote a detailed social media post about my experience, not to shame my family, but to break the silence around family favoritism that affects countless others. I included no names but shared the pattern, the land theft, the adoption revelation, and the emotional toll of always being the less valuable child. The post exploded overnight. Thousands shared similar stories, Messages flooded in from people who recognized their lives in mine. Reading your words was like reading my own biography. I thought I was alone in feeling invisible in my own family. You've given me courage to set boundaries I should have set decades ago. The collective witnessing was unexpectedly healing. Where my family had gaslit me for years, insisting I was imagining preferential treatment, strangers validated my reality with parallel experiences. Meanwhile, the local Indigenous community discovered what had happened with my ancestral land. Several tribal elders visited the developer, explaining the cultural significance of the property. Remarkably, the developer, moved by their advocacy, offered to sell back the still uncleared section at the original purchase price. A community fundraiser quickly gathered the needed funds. 3 weeks after my viral post, I received a call from an elder I'd known since childhood. "The eastern 2 acres of your grandmother's land have been secured," she told me. "The community has placed it in a protected land trust in your name. No one can ever sell it without your consent." I wept at this restoration, not of the full acreage, but of my connection to place and heritage. The community had recognized what my family refused to, my fundamental right to belonging. Takala followed through on his promise, selling the sports car and transferring the money to my account with a simple note: "It was always yours." My parents maintained rigid silence for nearly 3 months. Then a letter arrived, not an apology, but a justification. "Parents must make difficult decisions for the family good," my mother wrote. "Perhaps when you have children, you'll understand sacrifice." What struck me most was their continued refusal to acknowledge the forgery, the adoption deception, or the pattern of favoritism. Even faced with irrefutable evidence, they couldn't recognize the damage they'd caused. I channeled my energy into healing and growth. In therapy, I began unpacking the complex trauma of conditional love and persistent invisibility. I excelled at work, earning a promotion to regional manager within 6 months. Most meaningfully, I started hosting monthly gatherings for Indigenous adoptees, creating a space where others with similar experiences could share stories and healing practices. We met on my reclaimed land, connecting to heritage through traditional ceremonies my grandmother had taught me. 1 year after the confrontation, I visited my small parcel of reclaimed land on the anniversary of my grandmother's passing. As I cleared overgrown brush near the old oak tree, my hand struck something solid, a metal box, buried shallow in the earth. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to me in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting, dated just weeks before her death. The paper inside was fragile, the ink faded. "My beloved Wachiwi, if you've found this, then the land has called you back, as I knew it would. There are truths you must know. When your parents adopted you, I rejoiced. A new daughter for our family. But I watched in growing concern as your father failed to bond with you, not because of any lack in you, but because of the poison of his own failed dreams. Your father was once offered a recording contract, a genuine opportunity for the music career he craved. He declined it when your mother became pregnant with Takala. This choice, though technically his own, became a wound he never healed. He transferred his ambitions to his biological son, while you became the living reminder of his family obligations. I confronted him when you were 12, after watching him crush your spirit at your dance recital. He admitted he struggled to feel the same connection to you as to Takala. "She's not really mine," he said, words that broke my heart. "This land is your true inheritance, not just property, but connection to ancestors who accept you fully. The adoption papers changed your legal family, but this soil holds your spiritual belonging. The eastern acres contain our family's sacred burial ground from 7 generations. Unlike your father, our ancestors don't distinguish between blood and chosen family. You belong to this land, and it to you. When I'm gone, they may try to take it from you. Fight for it, granddaughter. It's the physical proof of your rightful place in our lineage. Remember, you were chosen twice, first by your parents, then by me. Even if they forget the blessing of that choice, I never did. With all my love, your grandmother Chumani." I sat beneath the oak tree, letter clutched to my chest, and wept until there were no tears left. Grandmother had seen everything clearly, the dynamic, the rejection, the pain. She hadn't just left me land, she'd left me truth. That night, I made a sacred fire on my small parcel, burning cedar and sage as grandmother had taught me. I offered prayers of gratitude to her spirit and to the ancestors who had held space for me when the living had not. For the first time since learning of my adoption, I felt a sense of belonging that transcended blood connection. I was part of something larger than my parents' limited vision of family. 2 years after walking away, my phone displayed a number I never expected. Dad calling. His voice sounded ancient when I answered. Takala moved to California, he said without greeting. He's taken a job in tech, says he's done trying to live someone else's dream. The silence stretched between us. I waited, offering nothing to fill the void. The house feels empty, he finally continued. Your mother wants to know if you might consider coming for dinner sometime. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I need to know if you understand what happened. Not just the land, the lifetime of treating me as less valuable, the forged signature, the hidden adoption, all of it. Another long pause. I'm not sure I do, he admitted with surprising honesty. But for the first time, I'm wondering if I was wrong. I can't return to a relationship based on lies and conditional love, I said firmly. But I would meet with you and Mom, with a family therapist present, if you're genuinely willing to examine the past. It wasn't an immediate reconciliation, and perhaps reconciliation would never be fully possible, but it was an opening, a small crack in decades of denial. 1 week later, I stood on my small parcel of reclaimed ancestral land as the sun set. I spoke aloud to my grandmother's spirit. I understand now why you left me this connection. You knew I would need a foundation that couldn't be shaken by human rejection. I removed a small portion of earth from the land, placing it in a beaded pouch I would carry with me always. Blood family might remain complicated, but my connection to heritage and self-worth was no longer dependent on their validation. The golden light of sunset turned the grass to flame around me as I raised my face to the sky and drummed a gentle heartbeat rhythm on a small hand drum, a song my grandmother had taught me. For the first time in my life, I felt completely whole. Not because all wounds were healed, but because I finally understood they weren't mine to carry. I am Wachiwi Redfoot. I am daughter, granddaughter, and descendant. I am the keeper of ancestral land and sacred truths. I am enough, exactly as I am. And to anyone watching who recognizes their story in mine, who has felt invisible, less than, or betrayed by family favoritism, remember my grandmother's wisdom. Your worth was never determined by those who couldn't see it clearly. Share your story in the comments. What 3 words would you use to describe how family favoritism felt to you? Tag someone who needs to hear they're not alone in this journey. Your healing is possible. Your boundaries are sacred. Your truth deserves to be spoken.